I will come back to the inner aspects. And I can tell you that many people, they can very much accept to talk to body cells. But if we talk to our mind, they start asking questions. When I ask my mind a question, so who am I? And that is one of the most important experiences to recognize that we are much more than our mind for many engineers and scientists and other people. Actually, the body cells, the mind, are thought forms with own consciousness, right? And many people who are doing healing activities with people, they know another inner aspect like the inner child, for example, but there are thousands of inner aspects, as I mentioned, you might not aware of. And all those inner aspects are thought forms with own consciousness. And we have also thought forms like your Merkaba or your Kundalini you can communicate with. That is something I will come back to it a little bit later if it comes to doubts and truthfulness. But you can also have inner aspects like the fear, like rage, like burden, like this kind of emotions where you think they do not have consciousness. That is different. They have consciousness. And what happens is that now, step by step, you perceive and you recognize that thousands of those inner aspects are existing. And some of those inner aspects, they might have fear of death, of their death. And that is something you should, or you could have a focus on if you work with the people during the telepathic communication events. So the question is, who am I? And the answer is, I'm many. And actually what is happening is that if you remember that one chart with a higher self object, that the apple you can see as your high self, and this high self consciousness is merging. And or the other way around, you merge with the high self, which gives you a complete new understanding what is happening inside yourself. That is one model you can use for that. And this multidimensional consciousness, together with all inner aspects, leads to integration of those aspects instead of separation. So even if you have an inner aspect who appears in a conversation with you as a warrior, the warrior aspect, you can, based on love, you can respectfully communicate and tell him that the time of fight and war is over, and that he now can experience a new experience, which is love. And that just as encouragement, if you like, that you start to use this kind of telepathic communication for healing processes within you, right? So it is all about the love to yourself and to all your inner aspects. And as I mentioned to you, from time to time, there is a very moving experience you have. And one recommendation I would give at this moment, at the moment we talk to dear mind or dear body cell or dear inner child, so we have a very clear intention who to address, but there is also the possibility to have an open question like this. I would like to meet now this inner aspect of mine who would like to tell me something important. And that is a very interesting process, because that is like a priority queue. If you ask this kind of open question, the inner aspect with the highest priority will pop up and will tell you what is important to that inner aspect. That is the other way around. Instead of just focusing on a certain inner aspect, and you might be surprised what kind of inner aspects raise the hand and they are so happy now to be able to talk to you. And this could even lead to other incarnations popping up into this kind of communication, saying hello, thank you so much for what you have doing across space and time for the apple seeds I showed you before. But possibly that is something we could also integrate of one of those other special seminars. Now, let's cover this aspect, remote viewing. Actually, you can use telepathic communication for remote viewing. Remote viewing is, if you will, a part of telepathic communication. Why that? Because telepathic communication is independent of space and time, and you are in contact, if you will, with any single aspect of the creation. Because you are independent of space and time, with your consciousness, you can travel through space and time. And because you can communicate with every single aspect, you can, for example, focus your consciousness based on a certain coordinate. This coordinate could be longitude and latitude, like used in remote viewing procedures, but that is just a small portion of the possibilities of telepathic communication. You also can use other coordinates, and we are doing that from time to time, which is a lot of fun, I can tell you. Which you then also could, based on the type of exercise you have, verify later. So you can, for example, you can communicate with an image of an animal living in a zoo, right? And then you can ask that animal to look through the eyes of the animal, for example. And you can ask the animal to look around, and then you make drawings of that environment. So you can use this as an additional remote viewing aspect. Then you can leave that animal and hover over the area the animal lives and can make additional drawings. You can look to an object in another country, for example, let's say pyramid, and you can, because of the focus you then do on a pyramid, you can communicate with the pyramid. But you can also define coordinates like, I would like to see people on that timeline in North America next year, February 20th, with a strong emotional love. And then you let it happen, and you will move. Remote viewing type approaches that you will move into that scene, which will most probably happen in that time. And you will, and that I have learned by myself. Therefore, I know that I jumped into a room with two teenagers doing for the first time love in Canada. So I was totally surprised and a little bit confused, and I stepped out of that room based on this approach. But you can do that in the past, a few thousand years ago, looking to a woman who has fear in Europe, for example. This kind of coordinates, all is possible through the universe, and you define what your consciousness is doing. You are doing nothing else than, from the existing realities, uncountable realities in the creation, you just select one reality based on the coordinates or filter you set with your consciousness, and that you can do with telepathic communication, because you also can talk to objects, for example, in the past or in the future. All is possible. So just to give this as an encouragement to do experiments with this kind of activities. Let's go to the very important part, doubts and truthfulness. And again, we are in the right hemisphere. And I show you now two major charts. The first chart is telepathic communication in context of sending information. That is very easy because you continuously send telepathic information to others. You can focus that communication on a special dialogue partner, and you can send thoughts, emotions, sense impressions based on your intention. The questions you ask, for example, will be coordinated together with the left hemisphere, right? But you also can do a broadcast of telepathically sending information. Broadcast means you can send that information to many dialogue partners, right? So that is quite easy to understand, and even we don't remember this behavior in our daily life. This is something which is normal, quite normal. Now, what about receiving information? And that is something I would like to talk a little bit more in detail. If you look, you have one dialogue partner. We do not know whether this dialogue partner is an unwanted dialogue partner or a wanted dialogue partner. I will cover that in a minute. But very important is to understand that the information I receive in the right hemisphere is always true, independent whether the source is valid or not. But the information you receive is true. Okay? There is one possibility that an inner aspect of yourself is doing the whole communication, and you think you talk with your dialogue partner you expect. And I will cover that as well. But the information that's very important is true. Now, it could be that after you have received the information, this information is altered. It might be blocked, it might be altered in a way that you have additional information or modified information from the content point of view. And that has something to do with the left hemisphere. And now it comes into the play that we have a strong partner. 39, we recognized, had the answer, yes, I will support you, and I really can recommend to use your mind. Why is that? This is because you can ask your mind whether the mind or any other inner aspect has altered the information here. The positive thing is that your inner aspects in your mind will always tell the truth. They will never lie. That is very important to understand. So if you ask your mind, dear mind, did you alter any of these information I perceived during the conversation with my dialogue partner? And he says no. Believe him. Believe your mind, because he is always saying the truth. Then you can ask, because he exactly knows what is happening during the telepathic communication with the inner aspect, you can ask, dear mind, do you know whether another inner aspect, like burden, like fear, or other inner aspects modified or altered the information? Then, and he says no, then you have a true information, not knowing whether that is an unwanted or wanted dialogue partner. Sometimes, and I can tell you one example, I'm doing telepathic communication all the time. And at one time, I had a beautiful love-based communication with one of my Syrian star sisters and brothers. And that was a beautiful, wonderful communication, as always. And as a standard procedure, I then asked my mind, not expecting that something was altered, was that okay, or did you or another inner aspect alter the information? And he answered, unexpected for me, he answered, yes, please talk to your inner aspect burden. And I, what? And then I started to do the same exercise like we did with the body cells and the mind. I asked friendly and love-based, dear boredom, please, could you say something about that? And he told me, yes, he had nothing to do. So he created the whole communication, which sounded and was expressed in exactly the same way as any other communication. I was not able to see a difference, but the burden created that in my own, the whole conversation. And that example shows that you should use your mind and your inner aspects to verify whether this information is truthful or it is altered. If the mind, for example, in my case, my mind, 95%, if there is an alteration, 95% is done by my mind. If he says yes, you can ask, what did you change? What did you added or removed? And then he will tell you exactly what part of that communication is removed or not, or added or changed. So you can then remove that. And I will tell you when we will use that, it's very important for scientists and artists and engineers. You can remove that or add that information, and then you have the truthful information available. And I will cover that unwanted dialogue partner in a second. So basically, that is something you can use as a procedure to have that truthful information available. There is another thing which is very important, and that happens from time to time, even though if we have very spiritual channelers, for example, from time to time it can happen. Because you have a very good experience in telepathic communication and in clairvoyance and this kind of things, the procedure becomes standard, a normal standard. But from time to time, the mind, because he used that is a standard procedure, takes control of the whole process, even you are not knowing that the mind takes over. So if you start the communication and it looks all fine, it might be that the mind took over control because of that standard process. And so from time to time, if you recognize something strange in the communication, you are not sure, you can do, that is something I'm using from time to time, ask your dialogue partner a simple question like this here, mathematic question, what is 18 divided by 9 multiplied by 3? And if you are in a telepathic communication and you cannot answer this question, even it's such a simple formula, such a simple question, that is a very strong indication that you still are in the right hemisphere, not in the left. If you very quickly have the answer on this kind of things, you are most probably here. And you also could ask your dialogue partner to send a strange information. Strange information means an information which you do not expect at all. And that works very well, because if your dialogue partner sends you a short story which is funny, or this kind of things you never heard before, then that is something which comes from the telepathic communication and not from the memory here on that side. Just to give you an idea how to handle this kind of questions. So sometimes in your during your events, you might have participants. They might tell, I think, out of 100, 3, 4 possibly, telling you, I do not see or perceive any information. I just see a dark cloud, and that could be generated by your mind or another inner aspect to protect you, for example. Because of very bad experiences in the past, even it is based in another incarnation. If you look to certain things you cannot handle at the moment, then this inner aspect of your mind projects something as an overlay about an information. And that has something to do basically with a block in your chakra system. And you can then, for example, do a communication. Please, this inner aspect, who is responsible to show the cloud, the dark cloud? I would like to talk about your feelings and your thoughts about that, what we can do to resolve that. And this kind of communication is always heart and love-based. That is very, very important. So if you have this kind of telepathic communication events in your telepathy center, this would be one indication. Now, another point, fear. Out of 110, 15 have fear, strong fear. And that is something our ET sisters and brothers recognize during a telepathic communication and will step backward. And one of the major fears people have is, oh dear, is that a kind of demon I will then be in contact with, for example? What I can tell you, the first thing is, if you are in contact with an unwanted being, then take it as a wonderful new experience and take it with a sense of humor. And I will tell you why. Even I have this day-by-day communication. I'm not always in the same emotional mood, so sometimes I will meet some of those wonderful beings. And I will explain that. This image is again showing this chart, and this section here I show with my mouse cursor. The astral plane is key if it comes to fear and meeting unwanted beings. First of all, it is very important to remember that we are immortal. That is very important to remember all the time. It is not possible that we die. All aspects of creation are based on creations of the source, right? Even beings, consciousness entities existing here on the lower astral plane, for example, who have a certain or follow a certain principle of coexistence, which is power over others, for example, even though those are creations of the Creator, very important. They are basically sisters and brothers of us, but just walking on the dark path. They are not enemies, right? So if we understand that we all come from the Creator and that we are immortal, then we can do the following. Instead of having fear, which lowers our consciousness below that line between 5D and above and 4D, we can change fear to curiosity, because we cannot die, right? That is just an experience. That experience could be very tough. That is true, but it's not possible to die. And we are not alone, by the way. So we are always accompanied by our guides, by our guardian angels and spiritual animals and this kind of thing. So if we change fear to curiosity and say, oh, let's look what happens now. What can I experience? Then the following could happen. I will tell you one example. I was not in the perfect mood, so I had contact to a religious figure. I thought first it was Jesus, but I recognized something strange because he had bite into an apple, and that bite was strange. So I gave my consciousness an impulse. I will cover that in a second, what this means. And this Jesus was altered to the real being, which was a reptile reptile brother, who tried to deceive me, right? And I started a conversation with that reptile and asked why the reptile beings attack the light. And that was a very interesting conversation I had. Even it was a being here tried to deceive me, because he started to tell me what the reason is they attack light. Because the civilization of that reptile being was living on the surface of their planet, and their sun become brighter and brighter and brighter because of the change of the state of the sun in their system. And it was so hot and bright that they were forced to walk into the inner of their planet and to live there to avoid the heat in the bright light of their sun. And based on that, their civilization started to became aggressive against each other, and their civilization was very much in the phase of dying of the whole civilization based on the light of their sun. Therefore, their civilization started to hate light because of that, what happened to their civilization. And I listened to that, what that being told me, and I listened respectful, because that was something, or is something, you should do in all telepathic communications. And I tried to explain that the light has two sides of the metal of the coin, of the coin. And you know what? One tear dropped down his eyes, and he was very touched by this conversation. And then we said goodbye. And a few weeks later, I asked whether they knew, my star sisters and brother, what happened to that reptile being. And they told me that this special reptile being changed the side from the dark to the light based on that experience. And when I'm back at home soon, he asked to meet me again to say thank you for that. But that is not for every reptile being. That is a very small amount of reptile beings who are open to this kind of conversation. But I just will show you that example, what happens. It is nothing wrong with unwanted beings. It's just to understand what is happening. And I would like to address some other things. Sometimes I hear, if you see a light and you go into the light, you are trapped. You are in a karma trap. Well, I will answer that in that way. This, what we are talking about is, you will see that light if you enter this astral plane. If you avoid to go into the light, which is your home, the light is your home, you will stay at this level you are at this moment if you decide not to go into the light. And that is the astral plane. It's such that simple. So that has nothing to do with the karma trap. That is just fear to move forward. That is not bad at all. So we have some souls existing in the lower astral plane for thousands of years. But you should be aware that if you avoid to go into the light, you just stay on that astral plane. It's such simple. The karma is based on that decision of your higher self, and the karma and all the experiences are experienced now, and is not experienced step by step. You know what I mean? So just let the fears go and ask your inner aspects who is responsible for this kind of fears, and then you give a lovely hug, and so step by step you dissolve that fear. Because this is shown here on another slide. What is happening here at the moment is the following. We come here as an incarnation to Earth with a very high, comparable high consciousness. A baby has about 50% consciousness. That's the reason they sometimes see angels and this kind of things. Then to the age of puberty, our consciousness is lower on a level of 25%. Then we start our spiritual path, and we raise our consciousness up to 35. Then we die. We raise our consciousness, are cleansed here in the sanatorium or hospital between 40, 50, 50, raise our consciousness through the pseudo paradise and merge again. So that is basically our path. But in our time of awakening, that is different. The consciousness in the past we received after being cleansed, basically in the sanatorium as a deceased people, we reach now during our lifetime in 3D. So we have more and more a high consciousness by releasing fear, rage, hate, sorrow, and increasing our love and joy, basically, right? Which leads to the following. Because our consciousness has reached this level in our lifetime here, we are beginning more and more to see the realities above that 4D line, which means the existing realities of our star sisters and brothers. So it is not that our star sisters and brothers come down to Earth and land their spaceships. It's the other way around. Our consciousness will allow to see the spaceships of our sisters and brothers. So there will be a time, I can tell you, where we will see our sisters and brothers in the sky, but many people around us won't be able to do that because the consciousness is too low. And that has here something to do with the astral plane and fear, rage, hate, and sorrow. The challenge is because we open our heart, raise our consciousness, we now entering a state where we manifest much quicker than in the past. And the difference between the lower astral plane and this here is that if you enter at the deceased people, this lower astral plane, immediately all thoughts together with emotions of fear, for example, manifest immediately. So if a Christian believes in the devil and he died and he believes that now the devil will appear, then the devil will appear. That is the manifestation, basically. So if we focus on the new paradise, the new earth, and living in peace and harmony, we are as the spiritual people telling others through the telepathy centers and other activities, we help people to release fear, rage, hate, sorrow, help raising their consciousness, helping them to reach that that level. That is basically what is happening. And the current situation, to give you a further additional image, is the following. This red waves show our consciousness state, the individual consciousness state, my consciousness state, for example, over our daily life. So sometimes I have really a standard 3D consciousness. Then sometimes I raise my consciousness a little bit and then I fall back. And then step by step with my spiritual path, walking on and releasing fear and this kind of things, I more and more raise my consciousness over my daily life. But I have fall back again. And this here, the green arrow shows our target. And if you see, the average is raising over the time. That is exactly what is happening here. Even we have our spiritual awakening and our spiritual work from time to time. Even we have many days in a week, 5D or higher consciousness, it might be that we fall back, and that raises chaos to us. We don't understand what is happening. I thought that I'm awakened and I had solved all my fear issues now, and then I'm back again. But you see, that path is, the direction is continuously upwards, which at a certain point will lead to the point where you continuously have a consciousness above that astral plane. That is our journey, basically, right? Okay, as a summary, if you have fear, remember that we are immortal, and recommend to change fear to curiosity. And if it's tough, this meeting with such a being, you can ask Archangel Michael or the Creator or Jesus or Buddha or whatever to support you, your guardian angel, your spiritual animal. All this is possible. But if you see that with a sense of humor, then that is just an experience, right? So, and to identify an unwanted being, I can recommend 3 things. I do that all the time. You can focus your consciousness, give the impulse. If you see that being, please show your true identity. So if you have this pure intention, you immediately will see that being changing to the real representation of the being. And together you can ask your Merkaba. That's a very, very strong partner, your Merkaba. You also can ask your Merkaba to protect you during telepathic communication, and just accept love, energy, and positive emotions that you can communicate with your Merkaba. And as I mentioned to you, you can also talk with your mind in all other inner aspects to verify whether there is the true dialogue partner, or is that an unwanted dialogue partner. I can tell you, most of the time at the moment, I use my Merkaba and mind and inner aspects to verify the dialogue partner. It works great.